Well, here we go. I think we can all agree that Judgment is a pretty good game. I do have some serious problems with the game, but none of what bothers me detracts from what makes that game special. I always thought it was a pretty niche title that told a pretty self-contained story, so after its initial release, I thought that was it for Yagami and his friends. So imagine my shock when its direct sequel, Lost Judgment, officially got announced in May of 2021. And with it set to be released in September of that year, my hype levels only rose. And just when I thought my hype levels were at their max, it was announced that Yagami's next mystery would take place in Ijincho. To say I had high expectations going into this would be a massive understatement. Before we get started, there's a few disclaimers I need to address. Firstly, and as always, there will be full spoilers for Lost Judgment's story. If you don't want to be spoiled, I recommend you come back after playing it for yourself. Secondly, this game is notably darker and deals with issues that may be relatable for a few people, so please proceed with caution. No joke, this game really earns its mature rating. And finally, Lost Judgment is a sequel in the truest sense. Things that happen in Judgment affect what happens in Lost Judgment. If you don't have the time for a 40-hour game, I made a video on Judgment that recaps pretty much everything you'll need to know. With the stage now set, I think it's time to see what Yagami's second adventure is all about. Lost Judgment opens up with some firefighters walking through an abandoned building. They come across some flares on the ground organized in the shape of an arrow. The firefighters approach what the flares point to and reveal a decomposing corpse handcuffed to a chair. We cut to Kamurocho on December 6, 2021, where we are greeted by our returning protagonist Takayuki Yagami and his partner in crime Masaharu Kaito. They are currently working a case for a woman who was scammed out of 1.2 million yen from some guy named Kosuke. After some investigating, Yagami and Kaito figure out that Kosuke is at a gambling hall spending the money he swindles from vulnerable women. Yagami eventually confronts Kosuke as he tries to receive his client's money back. You know, there's something eerily familiar about Kosuke's voice.
Fuck? You for real right now? Well, I pump iron at the gym once a week, my man.
Wait a second. By the end of this playthrough, I can say with confidence my version of Yagami would give even Eren Yeager a run for his money, and I don't say that lightly.
I'll kill them all. Every last one.
Well shit, I guess I was right. Yagami really is stronger than Eren Yeager. Jokes aside, after defeating Kosuke and his thugs, Yagami and Kaito force Kosuke to take them to his boss who has the money they're looking for. Before Yagami and Kaito fight the thugs, Yagami gets a call from Tsukumo regarding a new case in the city of Ijincho. So, I didn't mention Tsukumo earlier, but yeah, he was actually in the original Judgment. I didn't feel the need to mention him since he wasn't involved in the main story, and he was just kinda there. After defeating the thugs, Yagami and Kaito head to Genda so they can settle the case with their client. When they arrive, Genda tells them that Hoshino and Sari are at a courthouse working a case revolving around a police officer groping a woman. We cut to the courthouse where we are reintroduced to Sari Shirosaki and Issei Hoshino defending their client Akihiro Ihara in court. The judge finds Ihara guilty of sexual battery and orders that Ihara serve 6 months in prison. After receiving his sentence, Ihara reveals that 3 days ago a body was found in Yokohama. The body belonged to a guy named Hiro Mikoshiba, and according to Ihara, Mikoshiba took the life of his son Toshiro 4 years ago by driving him to commit suicide. We cut back to Yagami calling Sugiura in the office. Apparently, Sugiura and Tsukumo opened up a detective agency together in Ijincho, which they call Yokohama 99. What? Sugiura and Tsukumo, didn't interact with each other at all in the previous game. I get it's been 3 years for the characters, but how close did Tsukumo and Sugiura get in that time to go into business with each other? Semantics aside, Sugiura tells Yagami he wants him and Kaito to join them on a big case in Ijincho. The idea seems too tantalizing to pass up, and Yagami accepts the job on his agency's behalf. Yagami and Kaito head to Ijincho the next day, and as they look for Yokohama 99, they get their first taste of what Ijincho has to offer in the form of some bullies. The two see some high school students harassing a shop owner. Obviously, our heroes can't let this stand and step in to prevent any further conflict. After the bullies leave, the shop owner tells the two that those students are from a prestigious private school called Seiryo High. After this, Yagami and Kaito finally reach Yokohama 99 and run into their old friends Makoto Tsukumo and Fumiya Sugiura. Pretty weird how everyone knows who Tsukumo is even though he only talks to Yagami in the first game. And why don't the gang call Sugiura by his real name, which is Fumiya Terasawa? It is actually explained in the original game with them just calling him Sugiura out of convenience, I guess? I mean, if someone just picked up Lost Judgment, they'd have no idea who Sugiura actually is. Yeah, I don't get it either. Tsukumo explains that the case they want to collaborate on involves some bullying that's going on at a nearby high school. The four meet with the chairman of the high school, Yuzo Okuda, at a restaurant to discuss the details of the case. Okuda says the high school he's the chairman of is Seiryo High, the same school the bullies Yagami encountered earlier attend. Okuda wants to hire the gang to see if they can find any bullying at his school, and if they do, prevent it from getting any worse. The two agencies agree to accept the case and devise a plan of how they're going to infiltrate the school, with Tsukumo suggesting they disguise themselves as contractors. Their mission is to plant cameras around the school so they can find evidence of bullying at Serio High. To the surprise of literally no one, the gang find the evidence they're looking for rather quickly. When the gang collects their evidence, they meet with the chairman of the school and the homeroom teacher of Class 2-2, Yoko Sawa. Yagami suggests the best way to end this bullying is to have the bystander speak up on behalf of the victim. Oh yeah, her name's Koda, and the main bullies you need to know about are Matsune and Akane. None of them are really important to the story, so figured I'd just mention them now. Anyways, Yagami's plan has him planting a speaker in the class so when the bullies approach Koda and start harassing her, Yagami and his friends step in.
Slow. I can't fucking stand you.
Well, damn. So much for my appetite. You guys are making me sick.
Hey, who the fuck said that? We're making you sick, huh? You guys talking about us?
You see anyone else being assholes? Of course he's talking about you.
Yeah, I've about had it with you punks. This shit's getting old.
The fuck?
Ganging up on the same...
We cut back to the chairman's office with Okuda thanking Yagami and his friends for their efforts. Sawa isn't too impressed and questions why the chairman would even involve a detective agency in school affairs. Sawa is going to be very important later on, so we'll definitely be seeing more of her soon. As the gang relish in their success with the chairman, Yagami gets a call from Saori. Saori tells Yagami she needs his assistance with her client potentially being involved in a murder. Ah shit, here we go again. And that wraps up the introduction of Lost Judgment. It's very fine. I don't mean that in a bad way, mind you. I just think out of the 3 Yakuza games I've covered on this channel, this introduction is the weakest from a story perspective. I will say I do enjoy the lighter moments of this section. It's just really nice to see these characters back together. But it's weird. So much is happening, but at the same time nothing is happening. I found the most interesting part to be Ehara's reveal when he was found guilty in court, but that's such a minor part of the introduction. And the stuff we mainly focus on is kind of important, but like not really. It's more so an introduction to a few key players as opposed to learning any real information. I'm glad it ends with the start of the real story, but it's just a bit too boring for my taste. However, from a gameplay perspective, I love the introduction. You get to interact with a lot of the new mechanics Lost Judgment adds, which is nice. Getting a chance to interact with what was new left a very good impression on me. Speaking of gameplay, I think it's about time we start talking about what makes this game stand out from its predecessor. Quick note, this game, as I mentioned, is a sequel, so a lot of this game comes directly from Judgment. So I'm not going to fully go into detail over things I've already talked about, so you can watch my video on it or play the game for yourself. Let's start with what's new with the combat. As a brief reminder, the combat from Judgment was a direct continuation of the beat-em-up action combat used in the mainline Yakuza titles prior to Like a Dragon. It was broken down into 2 main combat styles, the Tiger and Crane styles. As you fight, you'll fill up your EX meter found at the top left, and when filled, you can execute these over-the-top special moves. Yagami can also use some of the items in the environment as a weapon when he's in a fight. I really liked what I experienced when fighting thugs in Kamurocho. I had some issues with it, like the weapons kind of ruining the pace of a fight, but overall I really enjoyed what it had to offer, and by the end, my Yagami was just super overpowered. In Lost Judgment, the combat styles are expanded from 2 to 3. Of course the Tiger and Crane styles make their triumphant return, but added in is the new style of Snake style. This is mainly used as a way to counterattack your enemies and focuses on parrying their attacks. I remember loving the Snake style in my first playthrough, but honestly I didn't find myself using it all too much this time around. It's pretty slow and isn't great when you're trying to chain combos between enemies. One of the things the game teaches you is to try and keep long strings of attacks going for as long as possible, and once a combo finishes you try and start another one right away. The Snake style just feels counterintuitive to that. It's not terrible, but it just doesn't feel the best when compared to the other 2. It's pretty effective with Yagami being able to slam pretty much anyone he wants when using the Snake style. And without question, the Snake style has the best battle music. But overall, I'd say out of the 3, this one is my least favorite. Really strange, because like I mentioned, I really liked the Snake style my first time around. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm playing these 2 games back to back and just found a strategy that was effective in the first game. However, the combat really shines with the refinements made to the returning Tiger and Crane styles. I was already a huge fan of the Tiger style in Judgment, but it's made even better with the few tweaks made to it. Even in the early game, the Tiger style felt a lot faster than it did in Judgment, so it was essentially business as usual for me. I didn't really lose a step with the Tiger style this time around, and if anything, I think in this game I really hit my stride. I was pulling off combos like nobody's business in Lost Judgment, and most of the time it was with the Tiger style. Nothing really mind-blowing here, but I'm glad the devs gave the Tiger style the few tweaks it needed to make it really shine. But the style that really shines through this time around is without a doubt the Crane style. This mainly has to do with the changes made to building Yagami skills, but I'll get to that later. If you remember from the last video, I wasn't a huge fan of the Crane style. It was less to do with the style itself and more to do with the skill balance between the two styles. Judgment heavily favored the Tiger style due to the fact most of the upgrades pertain to upgrading skills in that style. Crane was still fine if you were fighting a bunch of enemies, but you were actively handicapping yourself since you could use the Tiger style in a similar fashion. And when playing on hard mode, you really can't afford to hinder yourself. However, I gotta give credit where it's due. Ryu Ga Gotoku did a great job of improving both the fundamentals and special abilities of the Crane style this time around. Firstly, in terms of pure damage output, the Crane is far stronger than it was in its predecessor, making it much closer in comparison to the damage you could expect with the Tiger style. Secondly, like the Tiger style, the Crane style just feels a lot faster right from the jump, so already it was very satisfying to use. And thirdly, some of the new skills Yagami can get are not only very effective, but also just fun as hell to use. Like, Yagami can just jump off the ground like he's in the Matrix from a standstill and do a front flip kick. That's so cool! If there's anything these games have, ironically enough, it has to be style. You're exploring this realistic world in a dark gritty tale, but you're pulling off these wild moves in combat. Inherently, that shouldn't be something that works, but it's exactly what's made this franchise so special over the years. And at least in the games I've played, Lost Judgment does the best job realizing this vision. The sound design is very stylish, the special moves Yagami uses are stylish, and hell, the colors associated with each fighting style are stylish. But the biggest realization I've come to after this Yakuza look through is this. The combat used in Lost Judgment is not only this deep system you can exploit to play the most optimal way, it's also a system that allows the player to have simple fun. I like to really get into the nitty gritty of a game's combat mechanics and really learn how to use what the game offers to my fullest advantage. But you don't have to do that. If you think button mashing your way to victory is the way to go, then go for it. It's totally fine. Maybe not on hard mode, but I can definitely imagine people having an absolute blast just hitting random buttons and seeing what happens. Another massive improvement has to do with the level progression of Lost Judgment. Unlike its predecessor, you earn a much larger amount of SP as you play the game. You start out earning like 100 SP per fight, but eventually you can earn up to 1000 SP per battle! Yeah, now there's skills that increase how much SP you earn in a fight, actually incentivizing the player to grind since you can upgrade Yagami much faster. And the amount of skills, my lord. I know they added a new combat style, so that will have its own set of skills to unlock, but everything in the skills app is expanded this time around. You can upgrade Yagami's health in like 4 different categories. This was a very welcome change. I wasn't that mad at the grinding in Judgment, but I could totally understand other players' frustration with the idea. But even on hard mode, Lost Judgment's progression more than prepares you for some of the harder fights in the game. All in all, Lost Judgment definitely steps it up in the combat department. It just feels smoother to engage with this time around. The animations feel more fluid, EX moves look and feel a whole lot cooler, and most importantly, chaining combos is much more satisfying to pull off. It is a shame that the snake style doesn't quite fit my personal taste, but I can appreciate the effort put in to add a new one. And hey, this is just my opinion. I'm sure plenty of people love the snake style, and that's awesome. I'm just hoping if there is a follow-up, the snake style sees some of the changes the other two styles did. But let's save that follow-up talk for later. I have a lot to say, don't you worry. Well, I'm glad to see the combat system I revered so highly in Judgment was not only just as fun, but overall a much better experience. But as you all know by now, these games have a lot more to them than just combat. With that in mind, I think it's now time to transition into not just the world of Lost Judgment, but also the side content these games are famous for. As I mentioned earlier, Lost Judgment sees Yagami and most of his friends explore the streets of Yokohama Ijincho. Yep, the same Ijincho we explored with our boy Ichiban in Like a Dragon. Ijincho definitely has a different vibe about it this time around. Seeing as this takes place in a post-Tojo clan world, the overall feeling around Ijincho is definitely different. At first, there's more petty crooks and students in the city for Yagami to beat up, but by the end, Yagami is fighting some guys who could arguably take on the Tojo clan and Omi alliance. It's still just as satisfying to run around in, and on the PlayStation 5 at 4K while running at a smooth 60 frames a second, Ijincho is a visual treat to look at. Also just a small mention, but the models all definitely look better and definitely don't feel as stiff when they move around, so that's nice. Something that's really cool is on top of Ijincho, Kamurocho is fully explorable and unlike Like a Dragon, isn't just used for story purposes. It's just as detailed as it was in Judgment, which is the type of thing devs neglect to do nowadays. And like, the story barely takes place in Kamurocho, which makes the full inclusion that much cooler. But by far the best new feature in the world of Lost Judgment has to do with how you get around. While running on the street, hold the sprint button and... What even is this? Dude, I get that Yagami is just super talented at everything he does, but I used to skateboard, and you gotta be some sort of demigod to be able to just know what you're doing right off the rip. Honestly, knowing the track record of other Sega published games, this really shouldn't surprise me. So yeah, Yagami can go around skating like Tony Hawk and Ijincho. And it's just so awesome. Like, I've already gushed about the game plenty, but I can't help myself. This is just so cool. Since I pre-ordered the game, I got access to the hoverboard, which is unequivocally the best board to use in the game. And when you have this bad boy, you zoom around the city. That's all I really gotta say on the world structure, and let's not beat around the bush. The world this time around is no question the best out of the 3 games I've covered. It's not like Ijincho and Kamurocho are so different from previous iterations, but having both of them fully explorable with as much detail as they have is something I find truly impressive. And being able to skateboard makes exploring these areas that much more enjoyable. But what are the worlds if there's nothing to do in them really? As per Yakuza tradition by this point, we of course have our side activities and our social simulator aspect. For our side quests this time, they're more or less the same as they were before. I wouldn't necessarily say they're better or worse here. Just like last time, the side quests are presented like side cases for Yagami to tackle. And just like last time, they do a really good job at selling you on the whole detective thing, which is pretty neat. Some of them are pretty cool, but they really are just things to do on the side. The girlfriends pretty much amount to the same thing. They aren't really better or worse. This time around we got Emily Mochizuki, Todo Minato, Kyoko Hakase, and the returning Sukino Saotome. I don't really think it's worth going over each individually since they aren't that different from side cases. Yeah, 12 of the game's 54 side quests have you taking the girls out on dates. Fortunately, most of the girls aren't as bad as they were last time. Also, I think it's hilarious that I said Sukino was my favorite of the girls last time and she's the one returning girlfriend from Judgment. The girlfriends provide a decent distraction, but aren't really the reason you play this game. It's just another cool thing added to an already awesome world, so I at the very least can appreciate them. However, the best change made to Lost Judgment has to be the new life simulator system. If you recall from the last video, I was not really a huge fan of the reputation meter. It had its charm, but some of the front stuff was really not fun to go through. Just thinking about it, I'm getting painful flashbacks of baseball and mahjong. Gross. However, Lost Judgment actively fixes a lot of the issues I had with Judgment's life simulator, while introducing a few new ones. Instead of having a friend system, Judgment's life simulator aspect comes in the form of school stories. These are very similar to the drink links you could find in Yakuza Like a Dragon, but have one major addition that makes them stand out. You actually unlock the school stories in the game's introduction, but I wanted to give them their own time in the spotlight. As Yagami explores Seiryo High in the beginning of the story, he eventually runs into a third-year student named Kyoko Amasawa. Amasawa happens to be the founder and president of the Mystery Research Club. As the name entails, the Mystery Research Club focuses on solving the mysteries surrounding Seiryo High. When Yagami meets Amasawa for the first time, she's looking for a new counselor so the club can remain active. Since Yagami is going to be investigating the school anyways for Saori, Yagami recommends he become the new counselor of the MRC. And it works perfectly since Yagami has a lot of experience solving cases. The main goal in completing all the school stories has to do with a case Amasawa has been working on for a while. The case I'm referring to has to do with the criminal who calls themselves the Professor. This professor has been influencing Seiryo students onto a path of delinquency recently. To uncover the professor's identity, Yagami must infiltrate 9 different clubs who have been targeted by the professor. There's a lot to go over, so for this section I'm going to look at each club individually in the order I started them in. For me personally, the school stories are divided into 2 separate categories. You have the school stories that last over the entire game's runtime, and the school stories you could binge in a sitting. There's a pretty decent spread all things considered. I'll say, I was pretty surprised at how much I enjoyed the varying lengths. That's because each of the clubs has a unique minigame associated with it. These minigames definitely fluctuate in quality, but I'll go over them after I talk about each one. The first club Amasawa asks Yagami to infiltrate is the dance club. Rumor has it one of the members is skipping club activities to be a sugar baby. A sugar baby is when a young, often underage girl goes on dates with older men in exchange for money. To find out who this sugar baby is, Yagami joins the dance club as an outside counselor. After gaining the trust of the team captain Sayaka Nishizono, Yagami learns that the student acting as a sugar baby is Maika Takanashi. Amasawa and Yagami confront Maika while she's on a date, but this turns out to be a setup. The old man hands Maika to the returning Kenta Kasai of the Keihin gang. After defeating him, Yagami learns that the Keihin gang did disband, but Koga of the Keihin 4 started a new organization called the Neo Keihin gang. Yagami and Amasawa take Maika back to the MRC and ask her how she became a sugar baby and for what reason. Maika says she posted on this website looking to make some quick cash. She gets a response from the professor, suggesting she become a sugar baby with the assurance that she won't be physically harmed. Maika's reason was because she was trying to earn enough money so she could pay for her friend's tuition. Apparently, Maika's friend was on a scholarship but stopped coming to school around 6 months ago. The reason being was because Maika's friend was the committee leader for the culture festival, which was a colossal disaster. While planning for the festival, Micah's friend was a bit aggressive with the other members of the committee. Eventually, they all turned their back on her. Even Micah herself, so through guilt, she wants to make sure her friend can still attend school. Yagami suggests they go talk to Micah's friend so they can try and convince her to come back to school. Micah takes Yagami and Amasawa to her friend's apartment where they meet Kotoko Itokura. When Itokura asks why they are there, Amasawa reveals what Micah has been doing to keep her in school. It takes a bit of convincing, but Itokura eventually caves in and agrees to return to school, but only to join the MRC and with the condition that she keeps her scholarship. With Itokura returning to school, Micah has no reason to continue working as a sugar baby, and she returns back to the dance club. Before Yagami can conclude his investigation of the dance club, another issue regarding the professor arises. This time, the rumors are surrounding the dance club captain, Sayaka. Apparently, someone with the username Dancing Bunny posted on the professor's site looking to spread rumors about Sayaka's rival and former idol, Yuri Norizuki. The two happen to be interested in the same guy and made a bet between one another that whoever wins nationals gets to confess their true feelings. As the story progresses, Sayaka seems to let this bet distract her from the real reason she started dancing, which was to have fun and dance like nobody is watching. As the nationals approach, Amasawa finds another post from Dancing Bunny which says that they want Norizuki to be taken out before nationals. Obviously, Yagami can't let this happen and decides to find out if Sayaka is the one behind these requests. It makes a lot of sense. Sayaka has a lot on the line, so it's plausible to assume she's the one who made the request. However, when Yagami and Amasawa confront Sayaka to learn the truth, they learn it wasn't her who was responsible for the hit on Norizuki. Sayaka admits to requesting the professor to spread false rumors about Norizuki, but says she never ordered someone to attack her. When nationals come around, we find Kaito Sakikiba, formerly of the Keihin gang, ready to attack Norizuki. After defeating Sakikiba, Yagami learns that the person behind the hit was the former advisor of the dance club. Apparently, the professor denied the hit job initially, so Koga ordered the Neo Keihin gang to take the job. This guy was really butthurt when Norizuki decided to leave her life as an idol behind and wanted her to feel the pain he endured. Back at the MRC, Amasawa and Yagami go over what they learned about the professor from this case. Apparently, the professor is only interested in specific requests and won't accept just anything regardless of the payout. I think the story is whatever. I don't find anything really compelling here on account that it's a pretty textbook plot, and any of the really interesting stuff I found had to do with Itokura and Micah, but they're both shoved aside for Sayaka's beef with Norizuki. Considering this falls under the category of taking place over the runtime of the game, it's lackluster at best. Just like the story, the rhythm game is pretty by the books. You pick a song and hit the corresponding notes as they come down with accurate timing. Your timing determines how many points you'll earn for each note. You have different varieties of notes as you increase the difficulty, like these notes you have to hold the button for, and some of the notes that you have to hit 2 buttons at once. You also have access to these special moves that, when activated, give Yagami a boost as he dances through the song. These boosts aren't really that important and boil down to making notes easier to hit so they don't really break the minigame. Your main goal is to hit each note with either great or perfect timing to get the longest combo you can, which will in turn earn you the highest score. Some of the notes come pretty quickly on the hardest difficulty, but it never took me more than one attempt to at least get the passing grade needed to master the song. While it is simple, I am a fan of this rhythm minigame. I think that mostly has to do with the fact that the songs you play through for the most part are a bop. Since it's pretty easy even at the hardest difficulty, it was nice to take a break from the main gameplay and relax with some good music and a nice little finger exercise. I'm not a huge fan of rhythm games, so I'm glad the one here was executed pretty decently. All things considered, this one's pretty middle of the road. The rhythm game is enjoyable for sure, but not enough to carry the pretty boring story here. It's fine, definitely not my least favorite. Speaking of which... Next, we have the Serio High Robotics Club, and You gotta be kidding me. Yeah, I'm not going to sugarcoat this one. The Robotics Club is dog shit. There's a lot of reason as to why that's the case, but I should probably talk about the finer details before I explain why. Amasawa asks Yagami to look into the Robotics Club because there has been a recent string of robberies that have occurred where the culprit was a robotic arm on wheels. Amasawa suspects the Robotics Club because the bolts used to assemble the thieving robot are the exact same as the ones used by the Robotics Club. Apparently, these bolts are custom ordered, so someone involved with the club must be the thief. When Yagami heads to the club to start his investigation, he meets Domu Okidigawa, the president of the Robotics Club. Okidigawa is a recent transfer student, but rose to the rank of president due to his impressive reputation. Yagami also meets the rest of the members who comprise the Robotics Club. Their names are Tetsuro Kuramazaki, the lead designer, Shion Takamori, who's in charge of construction, and Dento Sakura, the main programmer. Okitagawa's role as president sees him manage the rest of the team by giving them schedules with deadlines and whatnot. As you progress the story, you'll see each of the members overcome their struggles so they can contribute. It doesn't really help that almost the entire runtime of this story, Okitagawa is constantly setting these impossible deadlines for his crew. One example is when the club's robot has a bug in its code, and Okitagawa applies a lot of pressure on Sakura to resolve the issue. Sakura doesn't react well to this and struggles to find a solution. With that in mind, Yagami decides to ask Itokura if she'd be willing to help Sakura with his code. Itokura happens to be quite the programmer, as it was through her help that Amasawa was able to find the professor's website. After some reluctance, Itokura agrees to help Sakura with his coding. She actually enjoys herself so much that she eventually joins the robotics club as well. This club is actually a really good chance for Yagami to learn more about Itokura. Even after returning to school, Itokura is still pretty cynical on a day-to-day basis. She's pretty lifeless, rarely if ever showing any true emotion. That's why her getting attached to the robotics club is such a big deal. She genuinely enjoys herself, and at the very least, I enjoyed seeing that. Eventually, Yagami figures out that the thieving robot's design was based off of Kuramizaki's original blueprints. Originally, it was meant to be used in a school event, but somehow ended up in the possession of the Neo-Keihin gang. When they confront him, he confesses the truth about the thieving robot. Kuramizaki grew tired of Okitagawa's constant criticism over deadlines and hated how he wasn't able to design the stuff he wanted. Kuramizaki started posting his designs online and caught the attention of the professor. The professor convinces Kuramizaki to design robots for the Neo-Keihin gang so his work can truly be appreciated. Obviously, Kuramizaki didn't intend for his work to be used for such malicious actions, but that's how easily swayed teenagers can be. Tell them what they want, and teenagers will do pretty much anything you tell them to. Yagami heads to where the Neo-Keihin gang built the robot and finds the robot in question, as well as the laptop. The contents of the laptop show the professor giving orders to the Neo-Keihin gang regarding which Serio student to target. The story also focuses on the robotics club working to win the Robo Rally competition, but it's really boring and not worth talking about. It honestly really bothers me how boring these characters are. The worst offender has to be Okitagawa. I don't know if he's intentionally written to be dumb, but nothing really clicks for him until the end of the story. And by then it's too late because I went into the final part of the story not really liking him. His big issue is he likes to micromanage, and as someone who hates being micromanaged, I already knew I wasn't going to vibe with this guy. He has a breakthrough in the middle of the story where he starts to listen to the other club members but regresses immediately back to his old self. So what was the point of the breakthrough? It rips away the impact of when his character arc comes full circle. And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, the minigame, oh man, it sucks. It really, really sucks. So it's a 3v3 competition where you need to have the most tiles on the field of your respective color. You control the main robot who will place the tiles, and your companion robots will defend you and collect the tile pieces for you to place. Well, that's what they're supposed to do. Yeah, the AI here really is far from on point. I mean, you have to go through the effort of properly upgrading your robots so they're more useful, but even then, they were never of any use to me. The fastest way to end this is to build a path of your tiles that end in your opponent's starting area, so luckily I was able to get through these pretty quickly. Doesn't make them any more enjoyable to go through, but hey, at least they don't linger for too long. But overall, this one's pretty garbage. At least Okitagawa has a good voice actor attached to him. It's a shame Zach Aguilar wasn't given anything better to work with, but hey, at least he sounds good.
I dissolved the robotics club after coming so far. Is this really happening?
On to a more positive note, next we have the boxing gym. This time, Amasawa assigns Yagami the task of figuring out the identity of the payback boxer. Rumor has it the payback boxer approaches scumbags on the street and challenges them to a fight so they can atone for the sins they committed. Pretty vague, but sure, I'm into it. Amasawa believes that the payback boxer is a Serio student named Kenya Oshikiri. This is actually the first time Amasawa's brother Kenta gets involved in the club. He usually just lurks around the MRC so he can slack off, but he's got some stakes in this case. When his sister suspects Oshikiri, Kenta comes to his defense due to the fact that the two were in karate club together. According to Kenta, Oshikiri is quite the fighter, and his new outlet recently has been boxing. When Yagami heads to where Oshikiri trains, he meets the owner of the gym, Go Todoroki. Yagami gets a crack at Oshikiri in the ring, but learns real quick that he stands no chance against him at his current level. If Yagami wants to face Oshikiri again and learn the truth, he's going to have to improve his skills and get swole AF. As you go through the story, each of Yagami's opponents will give him more information about Oshikiri's past. Yagami learns that Oshikiri had a very troubled childhood due to him being raised by a former patriarch in the Yakuza. Oshikiri's father was the patriarch of his own family under the Yomi Alliance, and from a young age, trained Oshikiri to be a killing machine. This training proved effective, as Oshikiri's first sparring match at Todoroki's gym saw him beat a contender for the OFBP title in dominating fashion. Because of his lack of restraint, Todoroki banned Oshikiri from training at his gym. While Yagami continues to train, Amasawa continues to investigate Oshikiri's past and learns two key facts. 1. That Oshikiri competed in an illegal underground competition called Genbukai, and 2. Oshikiri's father Fudo is the one running the competition. Fudo also happens to be in cahoots with Renji Honda, another former member of the Keihin gang. When Yagami reaches the point where he can challenge Oshikiri, Todoroki asks him to show Oshikiri the joy of boxing. Todoroki doesn't want to see someone with so much promise end up on the streets or with the Yakuza. In the middle of their sparring match, Oshikiri once again snaps and fails to restrain himself. But this time Yagami is prepared, and with his training, he's able to bring Oshikiri to his senses so they can have a good clean fight. After defeating Oshikiri, Honda and Fudo show up so they can take Oshikiri back with them so he can act as the Neo Keihin gang's muscle. With the help from the other boxers, including Todoroki, Yagami and Oshikiri fight off Fudo and Honda. After defeating them, Oshikiri finally has not only the will to stand up to his father, but the conviction to know he's making the right choice. Yagami takes Oshikiri to the MRC so they can discuss how he became the payback boxer. Oshikiri tells them that he became the payback boxer once he found out his Genbukai fights were rigged. The professor reached out to Oshikiri showing him evidence that his matches were fixed. Oshikiri decided he would challenge them again so he could prove that he could defend himself from his father. With the pattern of the professor's targets, Yagami and Amasawa start to believe that the professor is only going after specific students, but more on that later. The boxing minigame itself is rather enjoyable. The simplest way I can put it is that it's just dumb fun. It offered a great way for me to button mash any sort of frustration out of my system. I'm sure I don't really need to explain how a boxing minigame works, but I'll do so anyways. Yagami faces an opponent in a 3-round fight where he either needs to knock his opponent out or get the decision at the end of the match. Even on hard mode, you'll always beat your opponent before the match ends, so no need to worry about that. I really can't give you a better strategy other than just to mix up your combos and attack as much as you possibly can. It's just the most efficient way to bring people down. You'll unlock special techniques, but I never found these all too useful. And regarding difficulty, it wasn't until the final few fights where I really felt like I needed to be on my A game. The final fight with Oshikiri, which happens to be 3 phases, was particularly frustrating. If you pre-ordered the game like I did, you get access to some special fights against Yagami's friends, but they aren't mandatory to finishing the side quest. I did really enjoy this school story, and out of the ones that last the entire runtime, I'd have to say this one's my favorite. The gameplay is really fun, even if it boils down to me hitting random combos, and the story is pretty well told throughout. If I did have one complaint, it's that I would have liked to spend more time with Oshikiri. Oshikiri is this really stoic, mysterious person, and I found the few interactions he had with Yagami very interesting. It's a shame we didn't get to spend more time with him, but overall pretty great. Next, we have our first finish in a sitting school story. This one revolves around 2 rival skateboarding gangs. Amasawa asks Yagami to check out some graffiti that was tagged on school grounds. When Yagami checks it out, he sees the logo of the Ijincho Hounds, and it looks like the artist took direct inspiration from the professor. According to one of the teachers, the one responsible for this graffiti is Shinosuke Shikishima. Yagami's goal this time around is to find out why Shikishima joined the Ijincho Hounds and to convince him to leave the gang. After proving he can skate, Yagami is quickly acquainted with the ongoing dispute going on between the Ijincho Hounds and rival gang the Blue King. Apparently the two have beef because Shikishima keeps tagging over the Blue King logo. There's like some unspoken rule or something that if one gang tags over another's logo, they declare war on them. Yeah. Alright, yeah, that's something, isn't it? When the Hounds run into the Blue King at the skate park, one of the Blue King members recognizes Yagami from the MRC. After hearing this, Shikishima kicks Yagami out of the Hounds for trying to spy on him. The leader of the Blue King, Chiyoda, offers Yagami an opportunity to join the Blue King, mainly just to piss off Shikishima. Due to Yagami's objective, he decides to join the Blue King as they try to take down the Hounds. Each time the gangs meet each other, Yagami challenges a member of the Hounds to a skate competition. As Yagami defeats more members of the Hounds, he learns why the Kings and Hounds despise each other. The real issue comes from the relationship between Chiyoda and Shikishima. As you progress the story, you see the hostility rise between the two, and apparently the two have history with one another. Chiyoda and Shikishima attended the same middle school, and both of them were in the art club. Apparently, Chiyoda happened to be some sort of artistic genius back then, but had to quit the club after having a procedure done on his dominant hand. After defeating all the members of the Ijincho Hounds, including Shikishima, Chiyoda reaches out to Yagami because he and Shikishima ran into some trouble with the Neo Keihin gang. After defeating the thugs, Chiyoda lambasts Shikishima for getting the Neo Keihin involved in their dispute. While the two recuperate from the fight, Yagami notices that Shikishima is left-handed. In the photo he saw of Shikishima tagging earlier, he noticed he tagged with his right hand. Yagami believes that Shikishima was indirectly trying to inspire Chiyoda that there is another path to becoming an artist. Shikishima confirms this and tells Chiyoda that after he left the art club, he realized he wanted to see Chiyoda achieve his true potential as an artist. Yagami and Shikishima return to the MRC to learn about how he got involved with the Ijincho Hounds. Shikishima says the professor reached out to him about Chiyoda taking over as the leader of the Blue King. The professor instructed Shikishima to start tagging over the Blue King logo while being protected by the Neo-Keihin gang. Yeah, this story doesn't really do a whole lot for me. I like the whole skater vibe, but nothing compelling ever really happens. Even the information we learn about the professor isn't anything groundbreaking, but your time definitely isn't wasted because the skateboarding minigame is a pure joy to play. It takes the skateboarding from the overworld and dials it up to 11 with that over-the-top Tony Hawk cheesiness you want from a skateboarding subgame. It's just a basic score challenge, tasking you with beating your opponent's score. It's not difficult at all, so the real fun comes from trying to string together trick after trick to keep your combo going. There is also a side activity for racing, but it doesn't do anything to progress the sub-story. Overall, a pretty good time. I really enjoyed playing this one. Next, another short school story. Dude, this one is just a pure riot! This time, Yagami is asked by a member of the esports club, Toki, to clear the club from the recent accusations they've been facing. Apparently, the esports club president Genya Sanbanmatsu was accused of cheating in a recent practice match. Genya apparently beat a professional fighting game player in a match without even taking a hit. Yagami's goal this time around is to figure out the truth and find out if Genya actually cheated in that match. How does Yagami do that, you ask? This story, like the Skaters Club, doesn't really do anything for me. Like, surprise, Genya is guilty, he had a mod he got from the professor installed on his controller. The only bit of interesting detail that shows up here is with Virtua Fighter. It's just a port of Virtua Fighter 5 Final Showdown, but it's like a full game intended for just this school story. It only took me like 45 minutes to fully complete this one, so it makes the effort of porting this that much more confusing. Obviously, you can play the game whenever you want after you finish the school story, but since there's no point, I don't know why you'd return to it when there's so much else to do in the game. The only story thing of note we learn is that the professor must be a good programmer since they developed the mod for Genya. We've seen these developers put in some wacky things for sure, but just an outright port of another game as the main hook in a side quest? I got nothing but respect for how they pulled this off. I don't really think I need to explain what Virtua Fighter is. It's kind of baked into the title. It's a 2D fighting game. Nothing too complicated here. At first I used the Ryu Hayabusa clone, but I ended up finding this Rey Mysterio looking guy to be the better choice. He plays pretty similarly to El Fuerte from Street Fighter 4 if you're familiar with that game. I really enjoyed my time here. I had no idea what I was doing half the time, but it didn't make it any less enjoyable. And as a former competitive esports player myself, I couldn't help but love the idea from the jump. Getting back on track, we're moving back to another long story, the biker gang. Amasawa tells Yagami that the leader of the school discipline committee, Yuma Suo, has recently joined a local biker gang in Ijincho called Made in Heaven. And to the shock of the gang, Suo became its leader after just one race. Yeah, okay. Amasawa's task for Yagami is to infiltrate Made in Heaven and bring the gang to an end. Made in Heaven is a gang that was founded 3 years ago by a guy named Reiji Murasaki. He died 1 year ago in an accident, but his influence lived on throughout the gang. During Murasaki's reign, he assembled the 3 biggest biker gangs in Ijincho and organized them under Made in Heaven. These 3 gangs are the Bakun Rairu and their leader Bomber, the Raging Angels and their leader Rina Minagawa, and of course, Made in Heaven, whose current leader is Suo. Bomber and Rina have their own little side stories, but they aren't integral to the main plot and serve as obstacles for Yagami to overcome. Glorified filler, essentially. There is another character I've neglected to mention so far, and unfortunately that's no accident. The final general in Made in Heaven is this testosterone-fueled sad boy who calls himself Ghost. It may sound harsh, but this single character pretty much ruins anything I enjoy about the story being told here. While Yagami races members of Made in Heaven, he's teaching them all a valuable lesson about why they should value their lives. He shares this nice, intimate, one-on-one session with each of them and sets them on the right path. But Ghost, my lord! This guy just hates the world and honestly causes nothing but trouble for the gang. Besides the obvious plot armor this guy has equipped, there really is no reason for him to be here. But I know what you're thinking. Well, we don't know who Ghost is under the mask. Well, after defeating him in a race, he unmasks himself to be Dan Murasaki! Yeah, I thought I was supposed to be learning more about how Suo joined the gang and what his motives are. I mean, Suo is the final boss in this story and he does have a pretty solid character arc. But why are we taking time away from him because this guy has issues with his ego? Dan is literally upset because he hated being compared to his brother. To some degree I can understand, but holy shit, he's trying to destroy everything his brother built, but at the same time do whatever he can to preserve his brother's legacy. He's just the typical angry boy anime character with a tragic backstory, and to the surprise of no one, it doesn't fit whatsoever. Dan aside, the story is actually pretty great. I couldn't tell you how realistic a story like this actually is, and that's probably why I found it so interesting. On top of interacting with these weird personas, I think Yagami has done really well in this school story. For the most part, Yagami is challenging members of Made in Heaven so he can eventually face Suo. The rule of the road is that if you lose, you must obey the person that beat you. Each time Yagami wins, he forces his opponent to leave Made in Heaven. Yagami's belief is that these street races they get involved in are dangerous and he doesn't want to see anyone get hurt. It's not really a novel concept. Honestly, it's pretty basic, but I think the way Yagami interacts with these characters are what sell it for me. Yagami, for the most part, is a pretty laid-back guy and doesn't really do the emotional brooding thing. He just kind of goes with the flow most of the time. But during this school story, we really get to see a different, almost wilder side of Yagami. It's so different that even the scenes where Yagami will pose all gangster and say, "Yeah," don't really feel out of place here. I was pretty surprised how much I liked Yagami in this environment. He feels like a guy who's letting loose some pent-up emotion and revels in the danger of racing. That aside, the story ends with Yagami learning that Suo's passion before Made in Heaven was motocross. Apparently, he had to quit motocross after his parents split up since motocross was something his dad taught him. The final scene sees Yagami give this impassioned rant to Suo's mother that she's holding him back and not supporting her son.
But the death races he excelled in are highly dangerous things. These gangs put their lives on the line. And the only reason Yuma-kun got mixed up in all that is because you kept him from what he loved.
After this little tirade, Suo's mother agrees to let him pursue motocross once again, promising to support him in all his endeavors. Yagami heads back to the MRC and learns that it was the professor who contacted Suo about Made in Heaven. When Suo was still leader of the discipline committee, he received a letter saying Seiryo students had joined the gang. Initially, Suo's goal was to force them to quit, but he got sucked into the racing and eventually became the leader. Amasawa and Yagami learned that the professor must know personal details about the people he's targeting, hinting at Suo's love for motocross. Yeah, the story's pretty great. I'm not going to go over everything again. I think I've shared most of what I wanted to in regards to the story. The minigame itself, though? Yeah, it's pretty bad. So instead of just racing your opponent, you also have to take down the thugs they bring with them. Once you've cleared out all the trash, the race will begin in why am I starting at a severe disadvantage? There is a tiny bit of strategy, such as waiting until you're close to your main opponent before taking out the last thug, but it's just so stupid. Why couldn't I just race the guy I'm here for? Since I've beaten the game before, I had access to the best motorcycle in the game, and there was no way I wasn't going to use it once I could. It makes these go pretty quickly since you can store up to 4 boosts, and once fully upgraded, nobody really stands a chance. But even with the best bike, I can't emphasize enough how poor these controls are. I don't really understand why, but it feels like I'm moving a tank as I try to turn. It's just so heavy, why can't I just make a clean turn? Oh, and forget about it if you get hit with any of the many projectiles thrown at you while you race. Ugh, awful. Well, that wasn't great, but we still got a few more to go, so let's keep marching on. Next on the docket, we have the casino, and well, not gonna lie, this is literally a 3 cutscene story. You play poker one time, something that's not even really exclusive to the school story, and it goes by in maybe 15 minutes. And Yagami doesn't learn anything new about the professor. Huge waste of time, honestly. Only did this so I could unlock the final school story. Okay, scooting right along here. Next we have the Seiryo High Photography Club. This time, the new president of the photography club, Mei Toribe, tasks Yagami with capturing delinquency in the form of a photo. Her reasoning for this is that she wants to show the delinquents what their actions caused so they can change their ways. Things heat up, however, when Mei finds a letter addressed to one of the teachers at Seiryo High. The letter states that the teacher needs to bring 2 million yen, or the author of the letter will leak the affair the teacher has with one of the students. When Yagami heads to where the deal is taking place, he finds the former president of the photography club, Kanto Hikawa, meeting with the teacher to collect the money. When Yagami catches Hikawa, he takes him back to the MRC with Mei in tow so they can learn the truth. Apparently, Hikawa was contacted by the professor on their site so he could earn some cash and pay for his college tuition. Again, nothing really groundbreaking, and this is one of the shorter ones I finished in an hour. The minigame itself? Well, it's no Pokemon Snap, I'll tell you that. Yeah, breaking the pace of the main story with this bland, repetitive gameplay just doesn't do it for me, you know? Hey, if you like photo minigames, more power to you, but I can't really get behind this. I'm glad it goes by pretty quick, and some of the character interactions are fun, but definitely one of the weaker ones. And finally, we have the weirdest school story out of the lot, the girls' bar. Okay, let's get serious here. According to Amasawa, a Seiryo student recently went to a girls' bar and told someone that he knew the professor's identity. Yagami's goal this time around is to infiltrate the girls' bar and find out which girl spoke to the Seiryo student and find out if they have the information about the professor's identity. But of course, Yagami can't just talk to the girl he needs to because she only likes to talk to people she's interested in. What? Why can't I just talk to you, lady? What's your beef? Aren't you in a profession where you're paid to be polite to people? Alright, well, if Yagami wants to get the attention of the girl in question, he'll need to build rapport among the rest of the staff. You know, I could sit here and say this is a really boring story. I could tell you that it goes on for longer than it needs to. Hell, I could even tell you nothing new is learned here, but you know what? I'm not going to do that. I really don't mind going through this. I get that girls' bars in Japan are a pretty common thing, especially in the red light district. But seeing as I'm not from Japan or live there, I don't really understand the concept. I say this because I find Yagami's character in the story fascinating. When I said Yagami is catching a vibe in the story, I was being literal. He just interacts with these characters in such a fun way. He doesn't really care what happens. He's just riding the wave, which falls perfectly in line with his core character. Like we have a throwback to an obscure side case in Judgment here. That's just awesome. Anyways, after getting the reputation level he needs, Yagami approaches the girl who rumoredly served the Seiryo student connected to the professor. The girl's name is Emily S. Mochizuki, and recently she's been followed by a stalker. This stalker happens to be the Seiryo student Yagami's been looking for. His name is Ashihara, and he's here to kill Emily so she doesn't spill any of the secrets he shared with her. After defeating Ashihara and the thugs with him, Ashihara tells Yagami that he doesn't know the professor's identity, but has an idea of who it may be. Ashihara says that Koga, the new leader of the Neo-Keihin gang, spoke on the phone with the professor and addressed them as that brat. The information we learned this time around is that the professor has to be under a certain age, and Yagami and Amasawa presume the professor might even be a student. But that's crazy talk. I mean, how could a student have this much power and sway over the criminal underground, right? Well, anyways, that concludes the 9 school stories in Lost Judgment. Okay, so there is technically one last one, but it's the finale, and since that's the case, I'll talk about that one separately. From what you've heard so far, you'd probably assume I think the school stories are a mixed bag and probably shouldn't be in the game. Well, you're half right. For the most part, the school stories don't really add that much in gameplay, and the stories can be seen as a nuisance to go through. I mean, I only really liked a few of them, and only kind of liked 1 or 2 more. And even the ones I liked, I found Yagami's interactions to be way more interesting than the story itself. Then you get into how I like the story in some but not the minigame, and the minigame in some but not the story. But again, you were only half right if you fit my assumption. As a whole, I really enjoyed this aspect of the game. If you've paid attention in all my videos up to now, you'll know I'm a sucker for a good life simulator. While I think there's some bumps along the road, Lost Judgment school stories offer a refreshing change of pace from the core gameplay. I definitely would have added more fleshed out minigames, like why recycle the poker minigame as a one-time thing in the 3 cutscene casino story? I could think of much better minigames that could have been adapted and still would have fit the school vibe. For example, why don't you have a basketball minigame which has the basketball club getting involved with match fixing and the members are influenced by the professor? Or rework the dancing club minigame that's kinda boring into a volleyball minigame with a similar story. So much potential to be great that would admittedly take a decent amount of effort to pull off. But if we didn't have the school stories we have now, I wouldn't be able to come up with any of these ideas. And it's for that exact reason that I think the school stories are a good addition to the game. Beyond the fact that it's already a direct improvement over the friend system in Judgment, the ideas introduced are for the most part not annoying enough to detract from what they do well. Even if it is just a chance for the player to hang out with Yagami, the school stories are always something I'll look forward to on future replays. But we aren't quite done yet. We of course have one last school story to go through. This is of course the Mystery Research Club, where the gang come together to take everything they've learned so they can reveal the professor's real identity. As Yagami and Amasawa inspect the board, Kento notices something familiar with everyone they've interrogated. Kento says all the people on the board happen to be on the cultural committee. Knowing that all these students were targeted by the professor, that could only mean one thing. The professor's real identity has to be Kotoko Itakura. The motive is definitely made obvious throughout. We see Itakura outright avoid people that were involved in the cultural committee, not even hiding the fact that they are the reason she stopped coming to school. It's an event that is definitely still weighing on her, and being traumatized like that must have left her scarred. After figuring out Itakura's secret, she dashes off, locking the door behind her. Yagami and Amasawa break free and find Itakura outside the school, where she reveals her true intentions. Itakura did have a desire to return to school, but thought it would be tough if her former committee members were still there. So her plan was to turn all those who embarrassed her into delinquents so they could all get expelled. Koga shows up leading a group of Neo-Keihin thugs for the purpose of taking Itakura to their hideout. Koga says Itakura's unique hacking skills can help give the Neo-Keihin gang the edge they need in the criminal underworld. Itakura tells Yagami that she wants to get the strength to stand alone so she can no longer be hurt by others. Pretty counterintuitive to go with a gang when you want to stand alone, but whatever. After Koga and Itakura leave, Yagami calls on the help of everyone he's met in the school stories to help him save Itakura from Koga. As you play the story out, Yagami's friends will come to his aid so he can pursue the team's main objective. Eventually, Yagami finds Itakura in an office doing some work, and we learn that she's being held against her will. Itakura was talking big because she was afraid to reveal that her mom is in the hospital under the watch of the Neo-Keihin gang. Apparently, Koga wanted to have some sort of insurance on Itokura in case she wanted to leave her role as the professor. But of course, since Yagami has the ability to become friends with literally anyone, Itokura has no reason to worry. Yagami calls on Dan to, clear out the Neo Keihin gang. If we're being honest, he's probably way more of a threat than Kasai could ever be. After helping Itokura escape the office, Yagami takes her to Hamakita Park where the final confrontation with Koga happens. He's pretty easy to beat, all things considered, so I was kind of disappointed. I wanted this cool-ass final boss after this long journey, but what I got was a pretty standard encounter. Anyways, after Yagami defeats Koga, he's finally had enough of Yagami's shit and yeets himself into the ocean, declaring he will start a new empire on foreign land. What? My man just said, hell nah, brah, I'm out, peace. We cut back to the front of the school where Itokura makes up with all the people that bullied her, bringing the story full circle. We end with a nice cutscene in the MRC club room with Itokura fully acclimating herself to the club and back to school full time. That's a wrap. We're done. It's definitely a bumpy road, but this is a pretty satisfying finale. I mean, don't get me wrong, this is literally a plotline that was ripped straight out of Judgment's final side case. But with these characters, it definitely feels more appropriate and overall more enjoyable to go through. Even though most of them leaned on the weaker side of things, they come together pretty well and their characters are fully realized. Like, I'd be lying if I said all the characters from the school story share the spotlight. Most of them don't even talk, to be honest. But the ones that do demonstrate how far each of them has come in their respective journeys. It has a hint of a grandiose feel to it, having Koga assemble this massive army to stop Yagami. And at the end of the day, it's just a really fun story. Things don't have to be perfect to be fun, and the school stories epitomize this idea. Like, we're talking about a gang leader trying to abduct a child so he can grow his reputation in the criminal underworld. Inherently, it's a crazy idea, but each story wears that wackiness on its sleeve. I didn't love every single one of them, and they could be a chore to go through, but playing the game again for this video, I found myself constantly smiling as I saw Yagami interact with some of the weirdest situations I could think of. Even the Garbage Robotics Club had a few gems, I'll admit. And phew, we're done. That's it for all the gameplay of Lost Judgment. If I had one word to sum up everything I just talked about, I'd say Lost Judgment is much bigger than its predecessor. All the systems in Judgment were reworked and expanded upon to give us what we have today. A lot of the problems I had with the last game's side content were properly addressed here and makes the overall flow of the game feel much more satisfying. Like, wow, I don't have to engage with the worst gameplay to access the final side case. That's awesome. And with the power of the PS5, the world is expanded upon in a much grander way, giving the presentation a much needed overhaul. But when things get bigger, there's usually a price to pay. While things overall increase in size like the side case count, the social simulator aspect has been shrunk down in size. Instead of 50 friends, you have 10 school stories, which means the gameplay is more limited as a result. This limited scope, however, introduces much longer stories being told, giving us more opportunities to interact with the minigames. This is a problem because if you really don't like the Robotics Club, you still have to go through every single mandatory mission so you can finish the final school story. I mean, it is nice not to have to suffer through baseball again. Like, that really sucks. Even here, it's not much better if I'm being honest. But that doesn't mean everything we have in the school stories are winners, as I'm sure you heard. At the end of the day, though, I think Lost Judgment side content is definitely a step up from the first game. I like the personal stories told with all the clubs because they make this massive world feel lived in. I like how the side cases keep that detective vibe going. I like how there's 2 explorable cities. Bigger doesn't always mean better, but Lost Judgment adds in meaningful and important ways to enhance the overall experience. This time I can say you'll have a much easier time doing all the side stuff, and I can recommend you go for 100% this time around. Or at least the school stories. I know I bashed them a little, but I do really like them. Just had to be honest. Alright? Cool. And finally, arguably the most interesting, and I would say the most divisive aspect to Lost Judgment, its story. We last left off with Yagami on a phone call with Saori about a recent murder. Saori is asking Yagami to look into the murder of Seiryo High student teacher Hiro Mikoshiba, the same man Ihara named at his verdict trial. Saori believes that Ihara was involved in the murder in some way due to him knowing the location of the body before the police did. The motive is that Ihara-san Toshiro was allegedly bullied by Mikoshiba 4 years ago. This bullying caused Toshiro to commit suicide. Since Yagami happens to be at Seiryo High anyways, he asked the chairman if there really was bullying at the school 4 years ago. Okuba says there was a lawsuit filed against them by Ihara, but the evidence proved that no bullying had taken place. If he wants to get more information, Okuba suggests Yagami talk to Sawa since she was Toshiro's teacher. When Yagami meets with Sawa, he asks her about the rumors surrounding Mikoshiba's bullying. She's hesitant to share the information at first, but eventually says that Mikoshiba was just a normal student. Even as a student teacher, Sawa says Mikoshiba was just your average guy, nothing special about him. Oh, but if Yagami wants more information, he should go talk to the basketball club since Mikoshiba was a former player and advisor. How convenient! Yeah, this wild goose chase needs to end at some point. But of course, when Yagami talks to Kota, he gets ambushed by the bullies he stopped earlier. It's not until Yagami beats Matsune and his friends up again until we get any real information. When we get there, Yagami learns that Mikoshiba was pretty harsh during practice and would specifically target Kota. Besides the basketball club, Mikoshiba actually wasn't really liked by anyone. Matsune even says Sawa in particular was very harsh on Mikoshiba, probably because she believes Mikoshiba bullied Toshiro into committing suicide. When Yagami confronts Sawa, she says that they need to speak of this off-school grounds. So the two meet at Plage, a restaurant on Isazaki Road. Before Yagami can even meet with Sawa, he's ambushed by a group of men wearing white masks. After defeating the thugs, they rally for round 2, only to be stopped when some guy shows up to Yagami's defense. The thugs back off, but by the time Yagami talks to Sawa, it's already too late. While Yagami was being attacked by dudes in masks, Sawa was met by a woman who delivered a message and photo. The message was for Yagami to stay away from the Mikoshiba case. If he failed to do so, Sawa was meant to hand the photo she received over to Yagami. The photo shows a bloodied and beaten hero Mikoshiba strapped to a chair. Yagami finds a piece of the mask he broke earlier and is once again approached by the man from earlier. He introduces himself as the local handyman in Ijincho, Jin Kawana. This big shot has beef with Yagami investigating a case in Ijincho because he feels like his turf is being invaded. Yeah, okay pal. But since this is a Yakuza game, any confrontation ends only one way, with the characters throwing hands! After the two fight each other, Kaito and Sugiura show up to clarify a few things. Kawana is the local handyman in Ijincho. He, like a detective, takes any odd job that tickles his fancy. Since Kawana has been in Ijincho for much longer, he is considered Yokohama 99 Senpai, and Sugiura actually had to get permission to open the office. And there's some obvious beef between Kawana and Yagami even after getting the okay to investigate Ijincho. Kawana reveals that the men who attacked Yagami were members of the Yokohama Liumang, and they must have been hired by Ihara to stop Yagami from pursuing the truth. Yagami decides that if he wants to learn more about the case, he should head to the crime scene where the murder took place. While he investigates, Yagami deduces that Mikoshiba must have been brought here while he was alive, referring to the photo Sawa gave him. His investigation doesn't last long, however, as Yagami is greeted by Kisuke Watanabe, a detective in the Kanagawa prefecture. Throughout his conversation with Watanabe, Yagami learns more about Mikoshiba's death. Mikoshiba was killed around 7:30 a.m., and Ihara was seen on camera at the train station at 7:43 in Ikebukuro. It doesn't add up. How could Ihara have killed Mikoshiba in Ijincho and then been at Ikebukuro 13 minutes later? Well, I don't really even know how far those two cities are from each other. The story implies that they're pretty far apart, so I can only believe what I'm being told. But yeah, during this conversation, Yagami notices that they're being watched by some guys outside the building. When Watanabe talks to them, we learn the guy taking the photo is a Kaike, and he's a graduate from Kurakawa Academy heading to a reunion. He was just taking a photo since he heard a murder took place there. After this, Yagami decides he needs to look at the other key crime that took place that day, Ihara's battery charge. Hoshino accompanies Yagami to Ikebukuro Station where Ihara's assault charge started. Apparently at 7:43 a.m., Ihara spent over an hour ogling women before choosing his target. At 9:06 a.m., Ihara found his target, a woman named Yui Mamiya. The two get on the train to Shinjuku, and around the final 6 minutes of the ride is where Ihara made his move and grabbed Mamiya's butt. When Yagami and Hoshino look around Shinjuku Station, they find something very interesting. They notice only one blind spot between the cameras, which is pretty surprising considering how many people use the station every day. Pretty lax security, guys. Gosh. Things are beginning to become too convenient for Ihara and Yagami's mind, and wouldn't you know it, perfect timing. He's set to have a chat with Ihara as Sari sets up a meeting so they can learn more about Ihara and see if they can find a crack in his battery alibi. Before he meets with Ihara, Yagami tries to persuade Sawa one last time to give him some information about Mikoshiba. After some reluctance and a lot of guilt tripping, Sawa tells Yagami that she witnessed Mikoshiba bully Toshiro. Well, kinda. 4 years ago, Sawa was on the school rooftop and saw a beaten and terrified Toshiro try to hide from Mikoshiba and his friends. Toshiro told Sawa that Mikoshiba steals and beats him up every day. Before the final trimester, Toshiro tied a noose around his neck and jumped out of the window, killing himself. When Sawa confronted Mikoshiba, he pretended not to know about the pain he caused Toshiro. It was after this when Ihara sued the school, which led to the not guilty verdict regarding the bullying. Sawa says she feels terrible because she was coerced by the school to give a fake testimony in court. It reminds her of a time back when she was in high school. 13 years ago, when Sawa attended Kurakawa Academy, a classmate of hers jumped off the roof of the building in an attempted suicide. The attempt failed, but the boy, Mitsuru, was left in a coma he is still suffering from today. When Sawa mentioned the bullying to her teacher at the time, he responded by telling the bullies not to overdo it. Obviously, the backlash left from a student who attempted to commit suicide saw this teacher lose his job. This is essentially Sawa's big story dump, so be sure to remember what she said. It's going to be very relevant later on. Before his big interview with Ihara, Yagami heads back to Yokohama 99 and finds Kawana along with the rest of his gang. Kawana asks Yagami if he intends to continue looking into the Mikoshiba case. He's curious because if Yagami does, the Leomunk will continue going after him, and would you look at that convenient timing? Someone throws a brick into Yokohama 99, and what do you know? It's the Yokohama Leomunk. Yagami chases the men down into Chinatown where the leader reveals himself to be Tesso. He's an officer candidate for the Leomunk, whatever that means. The reason Tesso keeps attacking Yagami is because he was hired to kick him out of Ijincho. This obviously leads to a boss fight, and the starting shot of this boss fight was actually the key inspiration for this video's thumbnail. It's also in the steelbook of the game, which is where I originally got the idea of having Max use this as the base of the thumbnail. And what is up with this Wolverine reject ass boss fight? Like, he explicitly said, "Yo man, I'm not trying to kill you, but I gotta kick your ass out." So why is he attacking me with multiple blades? I mean, this is a video game. I have a health bar and infinite lives, so for the wow factor, I get it. But it makes no sense in context, like I'm fighting Edward Scissorhands, what the fuck? But anyways, after defeating Tesso, Yagami, Kaito, and Kawana return to Yokohama 99 and find Sugiura on the ground with Tsukumo cowering in a corner. While Yagami was away fighting the Wolverine cosplayer, security footage shows that Sugiura and Tsukumo were attacked by a different group of thugs wearing different masks. Yagami believes these to be some of Ihara's conspirators in the Mikoshiba murder. Yagami's next move sees him head to Kamurocho to plan for his big meeting with Ihara. Slowly but surely we'll get to that meeting with Ihara, believe you me. When Yagami and Kaito arrive in Kamurocho, they notice the city is brimming with a different vibe. This change of air comes from the new gang formed after the Tojo clan disbanded. This gang is RK and essentially operates like the Yakuza without all the rules and restrictions. We meet one of the leaders of the RK, Daimu Akutsu. Akutsu tells Yagami and Kaito that they're looking for a girls bar manager who vanished 5 years ago. That's quickly brushed aside as Akutsu says that their other leader's name is Soma and how cool the RK are, yada yada. Yeah, the story does this thing where it takes an entire scene just to introduce a character. Like they add the smallest connection when introducing most of these characters, which makes it hard to decide what's important to talk about. Like, Akutsu is kind of an important character, but besides looking for the girls bar manager, this scene is just a huge waste of time. But hey, we're finally going to see Ihara. Awesome, let's go find out if there's a connection between the murder and battery cases. You know, I've mentioned at length how much I love the scenes where the protagonist meets the antagonist face to face. Like, let's see what these guys say to each other when they can't fight, you know? And fellas, I gotta say, Ihara rivals even Ichinose in terms of scumbaggery. All we really get is Ihara essentially gloating that Mikoshiba is dead and no one can prove he was the one who did it. Every time Yagami or Sari mention Mikoshiba suffering, Ihara just smiles and gives off a snide remark like,
Doesn't that sound great?
"Oh, the pure evil, I love it." But it's the times where Ihara talks about how his son was bullied that I find the most interesting. The absolute disdain this man has for Mikoshiba is expressed superbly. At this point of the story, we don't know who killed Mikoshiba. For all we know, it could be someone unrelated to what's going on. So Ihara expressing how much hate he has for anyone that was involved in his son's death is much more powerful. Like, if he's innocent, you look at him much more differently than if he was guilty, and vice versa. And he's logical about his feelings too. Ihara mentions that Mikoshiba obtained a teaching license upon graduating university, and remarks at how dumb the institutions must be to give a license to a man like Mikoshiba. Mikoshiba is a guy who was confirmed to be the bully of a student who committed suicide. That's the type of person that should be nowhere near a school if we're being honest. This interaction does a brilliant job re-emphasizing the stakes and refocusing you to the mystery that needs to be solved. But yeah, anyways, Ihara pretty much denies everything the two are claiming in regard to their theory on his involvement in Mikoshiba's murder. So Yagami and Sari head back to Kamurocho and head their separate ways. Yagami heads back to his office and he finds Kaito looking frightened over something he watched on his phone. Yagami looks over and Kaito hits play on the video.
You gotta forgive me. I'll do anything you want. I didn't know he'd do it. I swear. Toshiro-kun was okay. I didn't know he'd kill himself. I really didn't know. I swear I'll try to make it up to him somehow. I'll spend the rest of my life making up for it. Stop it.
What the hell?
Stop it. Stop it.
And with that, we have our first plot twist of the game. Right after hearing Ihara himself say, "I did not kill Mikoshiba," we have video footage of him literally slitting Mikoshiba's throat. The whiplash is a little insane, but holy shit, the stakes are getting very high. This is no longer just a revenge tour. Ihara is declaring war on the law itself. This video causes massive uproar not only with the people involved in this case, but also with the general public. I mean, how could Ihara have murdered Mikoshiba while also being caught groping a woman? Well, before we can find that out, Yagami and Kaito need to figure out what this RK gang is all about. The two head to the RK headquarters to meet with Akatsu, where he actually tries recruiting Kaito into the gang. But as we know, Kaito would never leave Yagami behind, and his loyalty is rewarded with a meeting with the other leader of RK, Kazuki Soma. RK's goal is to maintain the status quo the Tojo clan left behind, and as I mentioned earlier, they can achieve this without the limitations of the Yakuza. Yagami asks about the girls bar manager RK was looking for, and Soma says the guy is dead. Yagami continues his investigation by meeting with the victim of Ihara's groping, Yui Mamiya. Saori takes Yagami to Mamiya's apartment, and she seems hesitant to let them in. After some reluctance, Mamiya invites the two in to talk about the incident in detail. The two don't learn much as Mamiya explains that she was just as shocked as everyone else when an ex-cop grabbed her butt on the train. Yagami mentions the murder footage, but Mamiya doesn't see how it connects, leading our hero to believe that the video footage must have been fabricated. Saori and Yagami return to Genda's to discuss what they learned and theorize how the event could have played out. Yagami has a theory that Ihara had a stand-in for the groping case. He comes up with this theory by mentioning that the groping case has a lot of holes. And by holes, Yagami means the blind spot he and Hoshino found at Shinjuku Station. Yeah, not a whole lot to go on, but leave it to our ace detective Yagami to figure things out. Yagami thinks that during the brief moment Ihara ran through the blind spot, he was meeting with the stand-in to swap places. When Saori mentions Mamiya watching Ihara the entire way, Yagami believes that Mamiya is involved in the plan and their previous meeting was nothing but a farce. Upon further research into Mamiya, the gang learns she attended Kurakawa Academy 13 years ago. Yep, that same Kurakawa Academy that random guy Yagami met in the street goes to. What was his name again? Akaike, right? Ah, but don't forget, Sawa also attended Kurakawa Academy 13 years ago as well. Sawa also just so happens to be the only person Toshiro Ihara confided in about his bullying issues. And Sawa's classmate 13 years ago attempted to commit suicide for similar reasons. Oh my god, Sawa is the person linking everything together! Sarcasm aside, yeah, Sawa is the key figure that could point Yagami to the truth about Mikoshiba's murder. In regards to the victim from 13 years ago, apparently he's still in a coma as they speak. His name is Mitsuru Kusumoto, and he's the son of the new Vice Minister of Health, Reiko Kusumoto. With this new information, Yagami decides to confront Sawa to see if his theory has any weight to it, and Saori decides to look into RK and why they're looking for Shinya Kawai. Saori and one of the NPCs from the last game, Mari, meet with some RK members and start questioning them about Kawai. About 5 years ago, Kawai was working as a girls bar manager when he was abducted by 10 people. The RK thug assumes those 10 people must have known who Kawai is. When Saori's cover is blown, she's saved by the returning Toru Higashi! Hey, it's cool to see him back. He's just as useless as he was in the first game, but still, really cool he gets some screen time. While that's happening, Yagami heads to see Sawa at her apartment, but upon his arrival, he ends up finding Kawana instead. Before he can get any explanation as to why Kawana is there, Sawa's door opens and Akatsu charges Yagami. While fighting Akatsu and his minions, Kawana ditches Yagami to try and escape. After Yagami defeats Akatsu, he calls out to Kawana but gets no answer. Akatsu rises to his feet and shows Soma holding Sawa hostage on his phone. The RK then knock out Yagami and bring him to an abandoned warehouse. Soma brought Yagami here so he could ask what his relationship to Sawa is. Yagami says he and Sawa are nothing but colleagues after he was hired to look into a bullying case. Yagami asks Soma what the RK want with Kawana, which surprises Soma as he knows him as Kitakata, a name Yagami has never heard. Okay then, things are starting to get confusing, but don't worry, we're getting there. Before Akatsu can deliver the killing blow, Kaito and Sugiri show up to save Yagami. It's pretty insane that we fight Akatsu and RK like 3 times in the span of 15 minutes. The fights are all the same. Well, Akatsu does start off with a chainsaw on one of them. That's pretty cool, I guess. After defeating Akatsu, Yagami and his friends head to Sawa's apartment to make sure she's okay. It's only after arriving they figure out that they're too late.
No way.
Alright, that was a lot to take in, so let's recap what just happened. For some unknown reason, Kawana showed up at Sawa's apartment. Yagami never figures out why Kawana went to see Sawa and was abducted by Arcade to learn more about Kawana. So it seems like Kawana is rather important to what's going on here. And also, the vibe after Sawa's death is so confusing, I don't know where to begin. Like, I get it, Sawa was the hot teacher in school and students seem to like her. And the way she goes out is pretty brutal, and I guess she's important to the story. But we're acting like the main story has revolved around Sawa the entire time. She's been absent for a majority of the story and hasn't really given any key information. Did you hear Yagami scream? Like, what the fuck? He saw his own friend's corpse fall out of his closet once and didn't even so much as let out a whisper. Oh, but this chick he met a few days ago warrants this devastating moment. And poor Yagami, oh man, they did my boy so dirty. But we're not quite there yet. With RK on the hunt for Kawana, Yagami and Kaito decide to check out Kawana's apartment to see if they can find anything that might lead to his location. Yagami comes across a flash drive disguised as a lighter sitting on the floor. He takes the flash drive and asks some of Kawana's neighbors about him. All they reveal is that Kawana's uncle runs a bar in Chinatown called Siren. Yagami and Kaito head to Siren to see if they can find Kawana's uncle and are surprised to be greeted by Soma. But this time, Soma comes with malicious intent and stabs Kaito while his back is turned. An enraged Yagami fights Soma, but actually ends up losing. Before Soma can apply the killing strike, the phone in the bar goes off. Apparently it's Kawana's uncle and he wants to talk to Yagami. Kawana's uncle... Alright, that's going to get annoying. I'm just going to call him Fred. So Fred wants Yagami to meet him at a place in the bar district. When Yagami arrives, he finds himself at Yes, Survive Bar, the headquarters for Ichiban and his friends in Like a Dragon. And the bartender is here. He has no lines and doesn't animate very much, but hey, that's cool. Fred called Yagami to the bar so he could ask Yagami to return the flash drive he found at Kawana's. Yagami obviously can't give it up, and this was just a big waste of time and honestly probably included so you had a reason to go to Survive. Getting back to it, Yagami brings the drive to Yokohama 99 to figure out what on it makes it so important. The only file on the drive is a video from 9/17/2008. The video shows Shinya Kawai bullying Mitsuru Kusamoto while Mamiya, Akaike, and other members of their class laugh and encourage Kawai. The date 9/17/2008 is rather important as this was also the day Mitsuru attempted suicide, so the footage must have been the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. What's also important is that this video shows Yagami Kawana's real purpose in life. After doing some research, the gang learned that Kawana was indeed the homeroom teacher of that class and his name used to be Yu Kitakata. Holy shit! Massive plot twist alert! This footage is essentially Kawana's calling card. And isn't it quite convenient that it was Kawai who went missing 5 years ago? Well, we know of one person in this video Yagami can see at any time. Yeah, Yagami heads back to Mamiya's house to learn more about Kawana when he was a teacher. Obviously, Mamiya reacts poorly when Yagami accuses her of being involved with Kawai's kidnapping, but Yagami has an ace up his sleeve and shows Mamiya the bullying footage. She instantly recognizes this footage and tries everything she can to try and delete it, but fails. But before she gives up, Mamiya calls on reinforcements and the guys who attack Sugiura and Tsukumo come in and attack. After defeating the thugs, Yagami unmasks one of them and recognizes the guy as Akaike, another one of the people involved in Mitsuru's bullying. To get the information he needs, Yagami takes Mamiya to Charles so he can interrogate her safely. Alright, prepare yourself for a nice good reveal. Mamiya reveals that Kawana holds her and her former classmates hostage with that footage. Kawana waited until each of them had gotten everything they had wanted in life before stealing their lives from them. Mamiya says the first time Kawana called for her assistance was when she and her class abducted Shinya Kawai. They were tasked with bringing Kawai to a warehouse and leaving upon his delivery. After a bit of time that day, Mamiya received a text from Kawana that showed a photo of Kawai's corpse, essentially tying her and her classmates to Kawana for life. And Kawai isn't the only one apparently. Including Kawai, Kawana has killed about 7 bullies with the help of his former class. Apparently, Kawana believes that everyone involved in Mitsuru's bullying needs to atone for driving someone to attempt suicide. And it's because of that reason in the footage that Mamiya and her classmates need to obey every order Kawana gives. If they were to disobey him, Kawana would leak the footage and reveal the location of Kawai's body. Alright, so Kawana's mission is to make bullies pay for their crimes by killing them. Well, I wasn't expecting that at all. You'd think I'd be prepared after the last game's wild plot, but nope, didn't see it coming. I mean, yeah, bullying had to be involved, it was beyond obvious. But murdering bullies is definitely not where I saw this going. And call me crazy, but I really like this reveal. We've been kinda meandering along, but that was all set up for this moment. And it's perfect, you get it directly from the source how everything went down and everyone's motivations. Yagami is such a delight here too, showing that calm and calculated personality we all know him for. And just like before, we have a really interesting case to crack. Sure, we have all the information like last time, but proving this in court is going to be quite the challenge for our plucky group of characters. But unfortunately, it's about this time where the cracks start to show. So before he can get into the Mikoshiba case, Yagami gets a call from Kawana asking him to release Mamiya. In exchange, Kawana will meet with Yagami and they can talk about what he just learned. Yagami meets Kawana in his office and everything that matters is finally revealed. 13 years ago, Sawa approached Kawana when he was still teaching about the bullying Mitsuru was suffering. Kawana thought the bullies would eventually get bored and move on from the bullying, but after hearing Sawa's plea, he decided to record them in the act. Of course, it was the same day Kawana recorded the bullies when Mitsuru attempted suicide. When the news broke, Kawana questioned his class and everyone involved blamed Kawai for the entire incident. But Kawana knew the truth and left his job as a teacher to pursue bullies as a way to atone for not saving Mitsuru. Kawana is a man who has a broken view on life, having very little faith in people. He believes that everybody involved should never forget what they caused, and you know what? I can kind of dig it. I understand why he's doing what he's doing, and while I don't agree with it, the motivation is there to heighten the stakes. But here's where things get dicey. Yagami isn't interested in any of that important shit and literally only asks about Sawa. In literally any important cutscene from here on out, do not be surprised when I say Yagami wants to get justice for Sawa. Like he's no longer in it for the sake of justice in society. He doesn't even really care about the other bullies. Yagami's precious Sawa was murdered. A woman he met, a week ago? I can't stand when a character is bogged down with bad writing. Like, this guy barely flinches when his mentor as a lawyer drops dead out of his closet. Why is he bent up over a complete stranger? There's no romance between them, so why is Yagami acting like he lost his wife or something? It makes no sense, and it really frustrates me because Yagami is such a good character. He has awesome moments here like I've highlighted, but this just ruins anything he had built up to this point. And this cutscene epitomizes everything wrong with Yagami's obsession. When Yagami asks Kawana about Sawa, Kawana says around the time Mikoshiba was killed, Sawa reached out to him because she suspected he had something to do with it. But does Kawana hone in on the fact that someone outside his core group of students knows his secret? Nope, Kawana is more scared of a detective he doesn't know coming to Ijincho to look into a murder he may or may not be directly involved in. Oh, and remember when Yagami met Kawana at the restaurant? You know, the meeting where Sawa gets the photo of Mikoshiba? Well, that was all planned by Kawana! Yeah, he's the one that hired the Leomong to attack Yagami. He sent Mamiya as a messenger to deliver the photo to Sawa. And he did all this so Sawa would get the message to stay away from this case. And it's weird because if you really think about it, Sawa died because of Yagami. If he had just left her alone, she probably would have never looked into the case. Maybe that's why he feels so bad, but it's still really annoying. Kawana yeets himself out of Yagami's office to try and escape, with Yagami obviously giving chase. He catches up to Kawana but is ambushed by the Kurakawa students again. Yagami defeats the students but finds out that Kawana escaped while he was distracted. Mamiya tries ambushing Yagami, but our resident master of Kamurocho style denies her. He takes Mamiya back to Charles to learn about how the Mikoshiba case played out. This is rather important as this is going to validate one key piece of information. Mamiya pretty much confirms the stand-in theory Yagami came up with earlier. While Ihara was off murdering Mikoshiba, the man in the Ikebukuro camera footage ogling women was actually Kawana. So yes, the Mikoshiba murder footage from earlier was in fact the real Ihara. And before this all went down, Mamiya met with Ihara to let him touch her underwear before the switch so Ihara could be caught red-handed. All in an attempt to make a complete mockery of the justice system while avenging his son. With this new information coming to light, Saori says she's going to file an appeal so they can bring the truth to light. Yagami and Saori head to the prison to get Ihara's permission to file the appeal. This is very reminiscent of the Kuroiwa meeting from the first game, but kind of toned down. Since Yagami has no real personal stakes this time around, he's a lot more empathetic, and it just does not fit. Bro, this guy had no attachment to Emi Terasawa. Wanna know why he was so butthurt over her death? Because he was naive and believed he overlooked a key detail that caused someone to die. It wasn't the person who died, but the fact that someone's life was lost because he messed up. It's pretty insane to think that the same guys wrote this story. I really don't get what happened here. It's like they missed what made Yagami great in the first place. I could really go on all day, but let's finish this off. This video is long enough as it is. When Yagami meets with Ihara, he pretty much goes over everything we've learned up to this point and is met with a nonchalant smirk from Ihara. Well, at least one of the characters is still good. But Yagami's persistence is rewarded as Ihara cracks and admits that he did in fact kill Mikoshiba. And you know what? This makes a lot of sense. The ruse has been solved. We know he did it. But Ihara does a very good job selling his motivations. Ihara neglected his son and treated him harshly, to the point where when he heard his son was getting bullied, he told him to toughen up. When Toshiro took his life, Ihara split up with his wife and, enraged and alone, took the school to court. When the court found no evidence of bullying, Ihara was approached by Kawana. Kawana offered a solution he couldn't pass up and went along with what he wanted to achieve. But of course, Yagami only cares about Sawa's involvement in this case and asks if Sawa ever talked to Ihara about Toshiro. Ihara says all he heard was a recording of Sawa admitting that Toshiro was bullied and how terrible she felt giving a false testimony. It's the irrefutable proof that the court didn't have during the case that proves his son was bullied. Ihara tells Yagami and Sari they can proceed with the appeal if they want, but he has no intention of admitting to killing Mikoshiba. Something else that's interesting is that Ihara genuinely believes Kawana is doing a public service. By this point, Ihara is probably more broken than Kawana, so I can see how he got to the point of wanting revenge. From his perspective, the system just forgot about his son, and someone came to him offering a solution. But come on. I get that this has to be here for the sake of the plot, but seriously, this is pretty unrealistic. We've seen some crazy shit on this channel so far. Fuck, we've literally seen the Yakuza take over the government, so why is it this hook feels wildly unrealistic? Maybe it's the lighter tone of the game overall. It kind of clashes with the darker story. Ihara does a really good job keeping it together, but still, not my favorite. When Yagami returns to the city, he actually realizes something with the help of Saori. Yagami remembers that Ihara and Kawana approached other families about his murder revenge business. One of the people had to be Reiko Kusamoto, the mother of the student he failed as a teacher. Before meeting with her, news breaks that the police are looking for Kawana for the murder of Sawa. A pissed off Yagami meets with Watanabe to ask why the police are targeting Kawana. Apparently, the department leading the case is public security, the department in charge of maintaining order. Yagami can't let Pupsec get to Kawana first and learns from Watanabe that he's hiding out with the Komichul in Koreatown. Except he isn't, because Yagami gets to the Komichul and is told that Kawana lied to see what the arcade would do. They showed up, we had to fight them, but we literally only get told Kawana is actually just hanging out with Tesso at the Liumang. So this fetch quest sees Yagami head back to Chinatown to confront Kawana and try to convince him to change his mind. Yeah, like that's gonna work. Yagami says to get Sawa the justice she deserves, he's going to convince Reiko Kusamoto to confess that she killed Kawai. And Kawana loses his fucking mind after hearing this. This dude has it bad for Reiko, and he never explicitly says he's in love with her, but listen to how this guy talks about her.
Just like Akihiro Ihara, she avenged her son with her own two hands. I admire her.
Kawana was adamant that Reiko was nothing but a victim in this case, regardless of what she did to Kawai. Wait, did he just reveal the truth about Kawai's murder? Why are you revealing Reiko's biggest and darkest secret out loud? Who cares if Yagami figured it out by himself? You don't just say that out loud. Ihara revealing he killed Mikoshiba? That's obvious. We were literally told all the details and information drip-fed that led us to that conclusion. And this sloppy cutscene caps off with Yagami and Kawana getting into a fist fight because they can't see eye to eye. So lazy! We cut to Tesso treating these idiots to some authentic Chinese cuisine made by Zhao! Hey, my boy's back. Ah, that's so cool! He has no lines and is apparently just back in the Liumang, but hey, I love Zhao. This guy fucking rules. This meal also brings an unlikely collaboration between Yagami and Kawana. One thing the two can agree on is that RK is a huge problem. They may be in cahoots with PubSec, so the plan now is to learn why they're going after Kawana and to prove that someone in RK is a PubSec spy. The guy they suspect the most is Soma, and he may have been a PubSec agent back when he was in the Yakuza. Their plan is to get two burner phones together so Kawana can call Reiko without being traced. Yagami takes the phones to an abandoned building and waits to see if PubSec sends RK thugs to find Kawana. Of course, RK shows up and Yagami defeats them with ease and finds out that Kawana is meant to be brought in alive. We are then brought to Mitsuru's hospital room where after the phone call, Reiko is approached by some dude in a suit. This guy's name is Bondo and he's like the head honcho at PubSec. He is the guy that's been chasing Kawana and he asks Reiko about the disappearance of Mitsuru's bully, Shinya Kawai. Reiko leaves the hospital and is surprised to meet Yagami waiting for her. Sugiura and Yagami take Reiko on a quick drive so they can reveal their intentions to her. Yagami tells Reiko he knows about Kawai's murder and how Kawana got the students who bullied Mitsuru involved so they could all atone. Reiko obviously denies this at first, but we've seen this happen before. After mentioning how PubSec targeted her after the Mikoshiba murder footage leak, Yagami asks her to confess to killing Kawai, because that's the only way our dear old Sawa can get justice. After using Sawa to guilt trip her, Reiko admits to killing Kawai. Reiko isn't really bothered by his death and says what she killed was less a man, rather referring to Kawai as an animal. And Reiko gives no fucks. She says that the other students who serve Kawana are lucky they didn't share Kawai's fate. This is important. You're going to want to remember I said this. Reiko says she's being targeted by PubSec and she has the power to access the pension fund the government has collected. PubSec wants to gain access to the pension fund because they want to use the money to bring Japan out of the recession they've been suffering. So we're going from a bullying incident that leads into this whole conspiracy surrounding a bully killing business to now trying to make sure the country doesn't succumb to financial ruin? I mean, when I say it out loud, it makes the issues all that more apparent. There's so much shit going on. Why? Yagami and Sari meet with the prosecution facing Ihara's appeal. This guy Takano happens to be a former Gendo lawyer, but was axed pretty quickly due to his cocky attitude. He outright refuses the notion that the murder footage can be used as evidence, even though the murder footage can prove Ihara's guilty, benefiting the law as a whole. Nah, this dumbass logic persuades the judge to grant the appeal, but the murder footage is not allowed to be used in court. And in the middle of this private meeting between the lawyers in this case, Bondo shows up. The only reason he's here is because Ihara was a cop before getting arrested, and Bondo is kind of a cop. Even when he talks to Yagami, nothing big happens. He just confirms that Soma is the PopSec agent, but we kind of figured that out earlier. So with these new developments, you want to know what Yagami does next? He decides he should learn more about Soma being an RK agent from Akasu. This is just another opportunity for Yagami and friends to beat up some more thugs so they can look like badasses. And before we can get any sort of information, a bunch of cops show up and just decimate Akatsu. What a huge waste of time. And even more gets added in. Yagami and Kaito decide the best way to learn about Soma is to go see his old boss when he was in the Yakuza. Bro, who cares about Soma? He's this game's Kuroiwa, but has this really long backstory. Dude, he's not on the screen enough for me to care about all this. He's just a bad guy. Making him a double agent was bad enough, but holy shit, why does he need this long drawn out off-screen character arc? We don't even get a flashback of Soma in the Yakuza. And seriously, this conversation is so beyond pointless. This old guy tells Yagami that if he's going to find Soma, he should check out a gambling hall somewhere in Kamurocho. And when Yagami finds the spot, what a coincidence! It's the same gambling hall from the beginning of the game. And hey, Kosuke's back. Guess that rascal didn't learn his lesson. But this reunion is quickly cut short as we cut to Reiko back in the hospital telling Bondo she plans to confess to murdering Kawai. But before she can take any action, something not cliche at all happens. You know what? This doesn't bother me too much. It adds weight to Reiko's character and gives her personal stakes. With two people trying to convince her to make a life-changing decision, the addition of her son to something she can lose makes the decision that much bigger. What it does for the rest of the story... Yagami meets with Kawana at the harbor to once again convince him to try and stand down on the bully murders. He's not going to listen to you! Pretty much nothing has changed. Kawana still isn't going to betray Reiko, and Yagami wants to get justice for Sawa. The reason Kawana had a Kaike bring Yagami to the harbor is to deliver a locket to Yagami. The locket belongs to Ihara and has a photo of Toshiro inside it. Soma shows up and murders Akaike and sends his men to retrieve Kawana. After defeating them, Kawana escapes as the ship explodes with Yagami barely surviving. The locket Yagami got actually has a special SD card. See, this SD card is called the Worm. I don't know what that stands for, but this SD card cannot be rewritten, so once a recording ends, whatever's saved is saved forever. The SD card contains the original copy of the Mikoshiba murder footage. Why is that important? Since this is the original copy, it is definitive proof that Ihara murdered Mikoshiba. Before they can prepare for the trial, Matsune of all people shows up. Apparently Akane's big mouth got her and Kota kidnapped by the RK. Yagami and his friends go to rescue them at Mikoshiba's murder location. After saving the girls, Soma shows up and tells Yagami that Reiko doesn't want him to mention her name in the trial. This guy really is just a fucking messenger pigeon. Alright, finally, final trial time, let's go. I've been really shitting on Yagami during this section, but he does still make a badass lawyer.
If we go through all the evidence and discover the possibility no groping took place, then it's on the prosecution to refute that.
After going over the basics of the defense's claims, Yagami brings up the murder footage from the SD card, even after the judge said that evidence wasn't allowed. Oh, but since it's on a super fancy SD card, it's fair game. Ihara's reaction perfectly encapsulates how I feel.
It came to me in a dream. Strange, I know.
As Yagami's theory starts to fall apart, he brings out the recording Kawana took of his conversation with Sawa. The same recording that reveals that Ihara's son Toshiro was indeed bullied by Mikoshiba. At first, Ihara thinks nothing of it, but when Yagami threatens to delete it, the jig is truly up. Yeah, Ahara just accepts and reveals that Yagami was right all along. What a weak ending for this character, man. Ahara was like the one character I actually enjoyed spending time with. He's the prototypical broken man who took matters into his own hands. But just the sheer lack of remorse from beginning to end makes him so fun to watch. He has no shame about killing Mikoshiba. He's true to his convictions to the bitter end. Why the weak ending? Why didn't he get his big send-off like Shono did? Really disappointing. But the story isn't over yet, as Kawana has just revealed the location of Kawana's body. This is essentially just a bad signal to draw all the key players in, so of course, Yagami and his friends give chase. Upon arrival, Yagami has to fight through waves of enemies, and this is pretty cool. It's literally just the same as the last game's ending, just told in a much worse way, but the grand scope is fun to go through. Yagami eventually chases Soma down and the two fight. Soma is actually pretty tough, but that's not enough to stop me from getting this shit over with. After defeating Soma, Yagami doesn't even get a chance to catch his breath as he finds Kawana next to Kawai's body. Kawana says as long as Kawai's body exists, Reiko will never be free, so his plan was to draw Soma in, and when they tried taking the body out, a bomb would go off. And Yagami leads in with an impassioned but rather annoying final rant to convince Kawana to give up.
Do you know how many people I've killed through the years?
Nah. But if you were really that kind of scum, we wouldn't have come down here. You wouldn't be the kind of person worth saving. This one is my fight, guys.
Kawana, the moron he is, completely throws his plans aside so he can fight Yagami one last time. It's a pretty decent challenge. Kawana actually kicked my ass a bit. I had to use this extract where I could execute Flux Fissure repeatedly, and I was able to cheese my way to victory. After defeating Kawana, Reiko shows up and reveals she will confess her crimes. And why does she do this? Why does she give up the chance to finally spend time with her son? Do you know why?
No.
Because Sawa got killed in the crossfires and she needs justice. Yeah, man, gonna stick with this terrible plot device right till the end, huh? Kawana starts crying like a weenie baby when he realizes everything he's done up to this point has been for nothing. Finishing up, Bondo gets arrested because of course he does. The bullies from the beginning of the game actually save a girl, and we cut back to the final night where Kawana reveals that he won't quit killing bullies, even though Mitsuru is awake now. Yagami is optimistic that Kawana will make the right decision, and like a perfectly timed cue, this plays in the background.
So to our breaking news. After an anonymous report, the Tokyo Metropolitan Police have announced the discovery of 5 murder victims. Found in areas across the country, all 5 victims have evidently been deceased for several years. According to the anonymous tip, the common thread between these victims is that they were all at one time accused of malicious school bullying. The police are working quickly to identify them, and an investigation task force is being launched immediately. This task force's first challenge will be to secure the cooperation of law enforcement across all of the prefectures involved.
Lost Judgment's story kinda sucks. I pretty much went through all of my problems as I went through the story, so all I have left is to clean up a few things. First off, Kawana. God, what a terrible character. If it wasn't made painfully obvious earlier, Kawana is supposed to be Yagami's opposite. He's the type of person Yagami could have ended up as had he gone down the wrong path. But that's just it. He doesn't. Because Yagami isn't a complete dumbass, he decided to run away from the truth when shit hit the fan. It wasn't until pursuing another life entirely that he found the truth he ran away from. So we don't need to imagine what Yagami would be like had he decided differently in the past. This makes Kawana redundant, not really adding anything besides another guy to punch. And Kawana's constant decision making baffles me. I get it, he feels directly responsible for Mitsuru's suicide attempt. But holding people hostage, murdering bullies years after the fact, isn't that a bit much? I totally understand Reiko and Ihara's involvement. I'm not justifying their actions, but losing a child has to be one of the most painful experiences you can go through. They are broken, so of course when the chance for revenge falls on their lap, they dive in. Kawana doesn't have that motivation. He just has a crush on Reiko. That's his character arc. He mentions Mitsuru, but the emotional difference when he mentions Reiko is too big to quantify.
If all that comes into the light, Mitsuru-kun will be labeled the son of a murderer.
Exactly. I can't let that... That's the one thing I need to prevent.
I know. That's good. That's exactly what you should be doing. So please, don't stop now on my behalf.
And oh god, Yagami. I alluded to it earlier, but Yagami definitely suffered the most in this story. What was once a calm and calculated character gets transformed into this over-emotional, irrational mess. Now, to give credit where it's due, Greg Chun still does an amazing job bringing Yagami to life. He at least bought into this testosterone-fueled version of Yagami, but still. Yagami was so cool in Judgment. He almost never made the wrong move, and when he does, he really paid the price. He doesn't really lose anything this time around. I can't emphasize this enough. There was no romance between him and Sawa. Sawa didn't even like Yagami. She thought he was annoying. Why are all the male characters in this game so horny? My god. It's such a shame because I really like Yagami in the side content. He doesn't really care as he goes about solving the case. Like, he just casually ends a biker gang at one point. Just full sends it.
As of today, Made in Heaven is disbanded.
Why does he get so attached to Sawa in the main story? I understand she's innocent and shouldn't have been killed, but another victim popping up tied to one of our characters isn't anything new for Yagami. He's literally seen his mentor's corpse fall out of his closet and didn't make a noise. It makes him look so stupid, and I need to reiterate that Yagami is no idiot. We've seen him solve difficult cases with virtually no effort and, more importantly, no emotion. I'm not saying he can't have emotional moments. I like most of the times he does in the school stories. But shoving them in every chance you get makes playing as Yagami draining. I've gone over the script multiple times at this point because I am a little conflicted. I've mainly been negative, but I do like some of the story to be fair. I like Ihara a lot because he's just a better shono. Ihara being proud and arrogant about his crimes make him a much more interesting antagonist because he's just fun to interact with. In terms of worldviews, Yagami and Ihara literally couldn't be further apart. They can reason with each other, but they have wildly different perspectives on how the law should be fixed. I like Yagami's main setting being a high school. It's different and offers the player a chance to see Yagami in a much different light, but when you put it all together, you start to see why it falls apart. Even if you don't realize that this is essentially a retelling of the first game's story, it's very apparent that the writers tried stretching things as far as they could. I was talking with my roommate and he asked me about what I thought about the Judgment games. I compared them by saying Judgment is a satisfying murder mystery drama. You play through the story and get this satisfying redemption arc from Yagami. Lost Judgment, on the other hand, is just another action movie. At almost every turn, the story wants to remind you how much larger in scope Yagami's adventure this time around is. And the story suffers because we are trying to introduce this grand plot that could shake up the gravity of the country. I know 89 could have changed the world, but it was used as a way to justify Shono's actions. It wasn't the entire thing holding the story together. It looks cool because that's what action movies excel at, looking as badass as possible. And this focus holds the story back, making it a much worse time to go through. With all that out of the way, we're done with Lost Judgment. Yeah, that's it. We're done. Thank God. This game's freaking weird. There's so much I like about this game. The gameplay is so much better, and so many of my complaints got addressed perfectly. No matter which way you slice it, just by playing the game this time around, Yagami will undoubtedly get stronger, so you'll have a lot of fun fighting thugs. The combat tweaks make getting into a fight much less of a chore since Yagami can essentially just blaze through every enemy. No joke, I played on hard mode and beat the secret final boss on my first try. The reworking of the social sim mechanic, while not the best, is much better than what we got last time. I do like the school stories a lot, it's probably the one defining feature you'll remember from this game, but the story is just such a mess that it really brings down the overall experience. And it does what every sequel should avoid, tampers with the main cast too much, effectively making them much worse. Yagami didn't need more emotion. He didn't need to freak out when Sawa died. You know why I like the table scene between Kuroiwa and Yagami? Because when Yagami expresses more emotion, the impact is there since he's not doing it as frequently. He's like a spoiled child this time around, losing his mind every time he doesn't get the information he wants. And on top of that, an antagonist who is mistreated and an antagonist that wasn't necessary just damper anything that this story has going for it. Maybe it's because I'm playing them back to back, but Lost Judgment has made me tired of the Yakuza franchise. I still really enjoy this game, but 100%ing it this time around really took it out of me. And that's the worst thing a game could do in my opinion. I think to some degree I've been a little bit too harsh on this game, but there's really no excuse. The writers this time around didn't use anything that worked in the first game and tried taking the core plot and making it a much bigger experience. But it fails because such a tight story was only told so well because it was condensed into just Kamurocho. Like a Dragon works so well because we're dealing with such massive scale stakes that can decide the future of an entire country. Like really, we dealt with the governor of Japan, legends of the Yakuza, and a bunch of other leaders. It made sense to go a bit extra with it, and it was executed well. I can't say the same for Lost Judgment, and that's really a shame. And this leaves us in a bit of a conundrum. A few months before Lost Judgment came out, a report was released stating that the Japanese voice actor and model for Yagami, Takuya Kimura, may not return as Yagami. Apparently his talent agency, Johnny & Associates, don't want the Judgment games on PC since Yagami could be modded. Takuya Kimura is a really big deal in Japanese media, and for good reason. He does a great job as Yagami for starters, and I'm sure he wouldn't have been able to land this role if he didn't have a good reputation. But in 2022, Sega wants to release everything they can on PC. Rumors suggest that Yagami himself is going to get replaced entirely as the protagonist in Judgment, and this really bothers me. Look, I get it. I dunked on Yagami this entire video, but Yagami is still one of my favorite protagonists ever. He still has some awesome moments in the story, and I feel like there's so much more that can be done with this character. It would be a shame to end his story on such a down note. But in May of 2022, we were blessed with DLC for Lost Judgment, The Kaito Files, which sees the player go through some of Kaito's adventures as a member of the Matsugane family. But I've never played it, and probably won't for a good long while. I chose the title of this video deliberately because I feel like the words bigger, better, and worse perfectly convey what my thoughts on this game are. At its best, it's this thrilling open-world adventure which sees the player tackle wacky tasks for the betterment of all involved. But at its worst, it's a dull, insulting tale that ruins any character development our main cast went through in the first game. This brings an end to my first look through of the Yakuza franchise. I specifically chose to speak about these games because they're the newest in the franchise, thus making them much easier to jump into. I'm sure I'll eventually get into Kiryu's journey, but for now I need to play something else. And if you knew me before I decided to start this channel, there's only one place we can go next. The series that inspired me to start this channel is what we're covering next, starting off with the game that started it all. Well, that was exhausting. Thanks for coming to this long video on Lost Judgment. I hope I did a good job conveying my thoughts. It was a bit difficult, I'll admit. I feel so conflicted about this game that I had a really hard time writing this script. Huge thanks to Max once again. I think we can all agree this is the best thumbnail yet. And I also need to apologize for how long it took me to get this video out. I was dealing with a bunch of stuff, this game is super long, and I ended up getting sick. Luckily it wasn't COVID, but I needed to take a few days off. I can't promise an official release date for the first Persona video because as you know, those games are famous for being long. I'll address my full plans for this look through in the next video, so stay tuned. Hope y'all had as much fun watching as I did making these videos, and I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on the new games in the Yakuza franchise. Catch y'all on the next one.